This is the Landlord Survival Show. When people stop being nice and shit gets real. You're the landlord. We're here to help. This is a show for what the gurus don't tell you about owning rentals. We're here for you because we're stronger together.
Brought to you by Empire Industries Property Management. Built for investors, by investors.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Landlord Survival Show. I'm your host, Steve Rosenberg. I am the owner and co-founder of Empire Industries Property Management Company. And I'm an investor. I've owned a lot of properties, a lot of good ones, and unfortunately, kind of like the ones you see behind me, a lot of bad ones. And trials and tribulations and things that go on in our lives, you know, sometimes you get off track. Sometimes you buy properties, you don't know why you buy them, you just buy them because you think they're a good deal, only to find out they're maybe not a good deal. And, you know, Empire manages about 1,000 properties. And the biggest challenge that I've personally seen, not only with myself, but with other investors, is that we all buy these properties and sometimes we don't have a goal in mind. We don't know why we're buying them. We think it's a good deal, but we don't really know what a good deal is. And sometimes the people selling the properties are the ones that are just the ones that only make money on the deal and no one else ever makes money. And managing these properties, I've learned that where the rubber meets the road is when you actually close on that property, and sometimes when you got to deal with the day-to-day operations. And, you know, the reason I created this show is to really show the fact that it's not all, you know, rainbows and unicorns. There's challenges in the industry. There's challenges with owning real estate, and even the gurus that are out there run into challenges. Some days they don't want to get in. Sometimes they get ripped off by vendors, contractors, all of that. And so we created a website. The website's the selfmanagemyproperty.com. And on that website and in our Facebook group, the Landlord Survival Group, so if you go on Facebook, you can ask to join. That whole community is made for the investor, for the person that's trying to figure out, for the person that wants some free tips. I created the Ultimate Landlord Survival Handbook. And that really is geared to how we at Empire manage 1,000 properties. It's what we do on a daily basis, how to understand discrimination laws, Texas property code, what is a dangerous breed, all those things that you really don't know the answer to. We've kind of tried to figure out the solution so that we can help. So I'm very excited about a guest I have today because this guy is probably one of the foremost people in real estate that knows about successes, and I'm sure he's got a couple failures hidden in there. So Jimmy, thank you so much for being on the show today, man.
You bet. And you said failures. We just had one last week.
Oh, I got to hear
with
it.
a vendor.
Really?
With a vendor. Yeah, we've got some students up here in Fort Worth. They bought a house, great house, plenty of equity where they could get it fixed up, make it happen. Had a contractor come in. You know, you can only do so much due diligence. You get referrals, and you never know when somebody can, you know, have a bad week, a bad, you know, month or something. Guy goes down, hits this house like a rocket going into space. It's going great, but then all of a sudden he starts needing a little more money. The work starts slowing down. A few miscommunications with my students and a couple other things. Next thing you know, the guys probably ripped them off about $20,000.
Ouch.
That's a hurt one. But there's still a lot of equity in the house. So in the meantime, you know, I always say, you know, from my perspective, I said, God does crazy things, but he brought a buyer right now that's wanting to buy it as is, who happens to be a contractor. So we're not sure, but then I got one of my other guys as a backup to go out and start getting estimates. But yeah, I don't care how long you've been in the business. I've been in this business, I think 32 years now. Jeez. And you're always going to have somebody do something somewhere. In fact, one of my friends from church actually owns a lumber yard here, and they build houses, custom homes. He said, hey, I've been doing it since 78 and probably had 30 or 40 people burn him in all those years. Big time burns. We say burns, they're over 10 grand. If you only lose 1,000 or 2, you're having a great week on something like that.
That's a little lesson. A burn is a bigger lesson, right?
That's right. It's when it hits 10 grand and up, now you're learning some new lessons.
Well, Jimmy, so that's a great segue. So let's back up. Tell everyone who you are, what you do, what your great organization does up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Give everyone a little background about yourself so that because I know you and I know who you are, but I don't think watching may just understand yet.
Sure. Of course, I'm Jimmy Reed. I started in 1987 into my real estate investing career. My background was actually electronics. And we slowly but surely got into the business of wholesaling. Back then, you had about 2 or 3 major players. You and I have talked about who they were, the old school gurus. None of those guys are even doing the business at this time that I know of. But they had great stuff, and I went in and I started wholesaling on a part-time basis. And within a couple of years, I was averaging part-time 55 wholesale deals. Now, over those 32 years, the language has changed. What I called a flip is not what we call a flip today. A flip is flipping your contract, not buying a house, fixing it up because you saw it on HGTV.
Yeah.
I also started the Fort Worth Real Estate Club. And back in the 90s, me and another couple of guys were approached by some of those late night gurus to create a lot of the real estate trainings, which you now know out there as the Rich Dad, the Russ Whitneys. We were fulfilling and training a lot of their students. They were using some of our material until they switched and started going in-house. I came back to do my own trainings. I had done trainings technically since 1990, but it wasn't like the trainings you see today. It was literally training 5 or 6 people on the weekend locally who could help me find more deals. I needed 10 of me here in the Fort Worth area because I had so many buyers out of California and high-end markets that wanted to buy in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So I had to train these folks to find me some deals, and then I paid them a percentage once I flipped the contracts over to the end user. So over all of this time and everything we've done, we run the Fort Worth Real Estate Club, which is the oldest real estate club in Dallas-Fort Worth that I know of. And of course, now there's so many clubs. Everybody's trying to do this day. The mentality is, hey, it's got to be, everybody's a guru. Everybody wants to do something for free. And I'm like, there is nothing for free.
Free's the most
you're going to learn one way or the other.
Free's the most expensive. Free's the most expensive.
Yeah, free's the most expensive. Yeah, absolutely. You can look behind me in my library. None of that up there was free. Okay?
That's right.
That's a lot of trainings.
Yeah.
And I've given, half of it away over the years because at the real estate club, I found my niche, and my niche was wholesaling. And eventually it became, for the gurus, we had to create a mentoring program. So when that started, we were the guys doing the mentoring. We had to go from New York to Hawaii. Eventually, I was even mentoring students in Costa Rica and Panama. But my niche became wholesale and probate, mainly because as deals get harder to find and more people get into the business, they're all going the same routes. Hey, social media, call the realtor, get on some, list. And I'm not a list guy. I always tell my students, if it's on a list, somebody else already got there before us to create the list. I want to be the guy that's finding deals nobody's heard of. And so we were using probate, still use probate to do that. A lot of little niches we found in that arena that's not just, I call it all probate, but there's a lot of area to that. From nursing homes on down, there's a lot of things you need to know about picking up those deals. Eventually, we got into holding apartment complexes, houses. I've always believed you create wealth by buying and holding. And then just like you're property managing, and that's where the wealth is. And then, of course, we went in and said, okay, let's do some international stuff. So we bought a private island down in Panama. We bought a beachfront house down in Panama. You talk about having, good times, bad times. Then we had an attorney steal over $1 million, embezzled money. So, I've been through all those cycles, and we finally sold the Panama stuff. We still have property in Costa Rica that we're selling. I always tell people when I'm out speaking, where you and I have met, whenever I'm speaking, that, hey, if you got a buyer for us, we'll pay you a real nice, hefty fee if you bring a buyer on that Costa Rica stuff. And nowadays, I'm running the real estate club, and then, of course, it's onereclub.com is the real estate site for Fort Worth. And then my website is jimmyreed.net, which we do all of our trainings there. And I don't do and teach everything. I know a lot of gurus just teach everything. I teach what I do. So I spend more time teaching on wholesale, probate. I do a stewardship training, which is how to become debt free. It's based on biblical principles. I do mentoring. And then, of course, we talk a lot about notes and IRAs and how to really create that wealth. So, I tell people, if you're looking for foreclosure guys, short sales, I'm not your guy for that. I do basically what I know I like to do, have always done, and that's the big three, basically. And that, to me, is wholesaling, finding those deals through probate, and then using and creating notes, buying and selling notes, wholesaling notes. Those are the three things I like to do. Now, property management is huge. The first thing we ever did was buy a rental, and I don't really teach too much on it. I always say, if you don't know what you're doing in property management, then hire a property manager. So yeah. I know how to manage my stuff, but when we use IRAs, we don't manage our stuff when it's an IRA, at least for rentals. We let a property management company up here do that.
Well, and you know what's so great about what you do, what I love about what you do, Jimmy, is you said a couple golden nuggets that I think people need to realize that you kind of flash through them. Is the first thing is you're very focused on what you do. You don't get out of your vertical. You have 3 verticals from what you said, and you're focused on those verticals. But what I know about you is you have other people come in to teach the things that you don't teach on. So like, for example, Bill Twyford, you're having me come in, you have people come into your group. So you make your group very general, but you're very specific in what you do, which is so smart, because the people that try to do everything and teach on everything end up knowing nothing, right? I mean, that's the old adage, right? Let me ask you, did you always have that focus, or is that something, because in the real estate industry, we get into real estate and we want to do everything, right? You want to rehab, you want to flip, you want to this, and so it's like a kid in a candy store. And at some point you got to learn that focus and that deep dive. And I always tell people, don't do everything. Just try to do 1 or 2 things very, very good, and try to focus on that. Is that something you've always had, or have you evolved into that thinking?
No, I actually tried everything.
Like me.
In fact, we had Bill and Dwan here just a couple of weeks ago, and some of my own students purchased some of their training because I said, I don't do short sales.
Yep. I
don't do foreclosures. And I said, yeah, Dwan teaches wholesale, but look at her wholesale, look at my wholesale, and you'll get 2 views on wholesale.
Yep.
I've just done it a long time. Over the years, yes, I've learned that, I started out, like I said, when I started, I was doing the work. So I did the rehab work. So I learned the hard way of how to rehab houses and found that that's work. I don't want to do that. I got in the business to sit back and take it easy. But I learned a lot by doing that. So I tell people this, you do need to focus. You need to find 2 or 3 things you focus on. And then you don't need to focus on the whole city. Could you imagine you're in Houston? I wouldn't do all of Houston. I don't do all of Dallas. I don't even do Dallas anymore, unless it's a phone call deal and I don't have to go. I have 3, 4, 5 zip codes in Fort Worth that I deal with now. And that's what I focus on, because I am looking more at retirement now. If I would, 30 years ago, I went everywhere. I mean, heck, we still have stuff in Costa Rica and Panama, but you have to focus, and you train yourself to stay focused. But I also have a saying, the more you know, the more you're worth. But you don't want to get so scattered out that you're a jack of all trades, because you get a lot of knowledge and you learn a lot. But if you can take 2 or 3, I'm all for going out there and giving it a shot, then find the 2 or 3 you kind of like and then pour everything into that. I still love wholesaling. My wife, if she had her option, we would retail everything there is, because her heart's in designing. My heart's in just give me the check and let me move on to the other one. Because I don't like rehabbing. I've done it, long enough. And if you own apartment complexes, folks, you're constantly rehabbing. Every week there's something going on in an apartment complex, because it's a turnover type
high turnover
property, where houses are more, you're going to get 4 or 5 years out of some tenants. So it's not as much rehabbing going on. You're always going to go through rehab crews. You'll find a good one, but eventually something will go wrong. Eventually they'll get too high, and then you have to find someone else. And guys probably like you, Steve, probably have dozens of contractors just waiting to go to the next one, because everyone will make a mistake. And I don't have a problem with that. But if I'm in the wholesale business and I'm wholesaling notes, if I'm wholesaling houses, a little harder to wholesale apartments, but it can be done, then I'm not having to worry about the rehab. But I do teach my students all about rehab, because eventually it's going to end up there, whether it's a buy and hold guy or it's a buy and sell guy. Eventually they are going to rehab it. So when I teach wholesale, I do it different than most people, because I teach it from the perspective of, if you can give your investor not only the deal, but a budget and showing them that this is what it's going to take to rehab this house, they're going to work faster with you. Because nowadays, everyone always says this. I don't know if you get this email, but I get it 20, 30 times a day. Great deal. West Side Fort Worth. ARV worth this. House can be purchased for this. Then they say this, repairs to be determined. Well, how do you know it's a great deal if you haven't determined the repairs?
Exactly.
Or they'll do this, repairs, $20,000. You go, really? I can't even put the kitchen in for 15 grand. So, and I had a guy tell me one time, I kid you not, and he took pictures and sent it, and it was one of those, okay, he seems to know what he's talking about. Called one of my seasoned investors. He's saying he needs about $20,000 or $30,000 in rehab, and he took all these pictures. He just failed to take the picture of the entire back house missing because of a fire.
Huh.
I'm like, 30,000?
Convenient.
Yeah. So I won't even work with the guy because he doesn't want to get trained. He wants to figure it out on his own. And in the meantime, what he's doing, he's pissing off all the seasoned investors because you waste their time. So I teach my students how to present everything to the investor, take all the pictures of the bad stuff. They'll know that if you give them the bad stuff, they respect that. You don't want to waste their time. And I always teach, even at the club, everywhere I speak, the most valuable asset we've been given is time. And I don't want to waste it. But I do believe the more you know, the more you're worth. And I preach that all the time with my students. The more you know, the more you're worth. But then once you know it, you focus it down to what you're trying to accomplish. Focus on 2 or 3 things until you become great at it. Then if you want to expand, expand.
Well, and the most important thing that you do and that you said is essentially you've learned to say no, right? Because that's the hardest thing, right? The hardest thing is to say, you know what, that's a great deal, but it's not a great deal for me. And because of that, I'm going to pass. And that's, and again, if you have the knowledge and you have the ability and you have the self-discipline, because that's what I think a lot of people lack is they feel like maybe the fear of missing out or whatever the reason may be, or the potential money, that's where they miss out. And they go, I'm going to take that deal. But like you said, here's an example. If you said, hey, I'll take a deal in Dallas, but how many deals in your zip code are you now missing because you're driving all the way to Dallas, looking at a deal that's not even in your wheelhouse? Because now it's not just one trip. You're making multiple trips to Dallas. You got to get vendors. And it's funny you mentioned the vendors because we are constantly working with vendors and talking to them. I've got to have conversations today with a couple that their prices are creeping up. And I've got to let them know, listen, we have 18 make-readies about to happen with move-outs. We need some better pricing. If you don't like it, we'll just take our toys and go somewhere else. That's fine. We're going to give you the opportunity to make the right decision. But if your decision does not align with what we need, then, like you said, the vendors, you got to make that call and you got to tell them no. And you got to say, you know what, this is what we need. And this is, it's got to be win-win. I have no problem with the vendor or contractor making money. No problem with that at all. And I'm a big believer in you get what you pay for, as long as greed does not step in. That's, I think, the biggest challenge with a lot of these contractors is they get lazy and they get greedy, which is the 2 reasons why most people fail is because of laziness and greed. And that's my experience with a lot of these contractors over the years. I don't know if you've had the same challenges.
Oh, absolutely. Like you said, you've got to make it a win-win for everybody. Even when you're purchasing property, it has to be a win. Even like we just bought one last week. In fact, it's still floating in escrow because the second lien hasn't signed off yet. And again, people get greedy. They start looking at things, and you have to go, listen, this is a business. And first off, when people get into this, when they're first starting out, they don't look at it as a business. I've always seen they look at it as get rich quick. And so even from the investor side, there's a lot of greed. You have to remember it's a business. Yep. It has to work for the seller. It has to work for the investor. It has to work for every vendor you use. But at the same time, they have to look at it as a vendor. I tell my vendors, you got to remember we're volume. We're not a one-time deal where you make a big hit. We're volume. And this guy that just burned us last week missed out on major, major profits he could be making. The fact was he did good work. The work was looking good. Just the problem is he got greedy. He got stretched out. I don't know what all the problems were. But you lost the opportunity now to do a bunch of work. Just like you said, you've got, I think, 18 coming up. Somebody should say, hey, that's my business for the next 2 months.
Yep.
and I've got guaranteed money. And if I make this investor happy and I still make a profit and I give him a good deal or her a good deal, they're going to keep me busy, and especially in the management. And that's one thing I wanted to come back to. When you're new starting out, everybody wants to make big money. And if you don't know and you're not an expert in every area of real estate, and that's very hard to do, it's hard to survive. And I tell people the way you survive, the way I survived in real estate for 32 years is you got to have rental, because the wholesale market's not always great. The retail market's not always great, but the rental market, there's always a demand. People have to live somewhere. And I've had people tell me before, oh, you've got a lot of rentals. You don't do a whole lot of buying and selling. And I'm like, I don't. When the market is too high, I'm not going to get sucked into paying too much. I've been through what I call 3 cycles of real estate. And I've seen the people after they get, the market gets up there to the top, they get greedy, then it comes crashing down. No, I don't buy when it's up here. Right. I just hold rentals at that point. I'll flip a note or two. I do less business when the market is really hot. And then when it drops, I'm a busy guy because I'm going and picking up all the stuff that you just warned everybody about, which was don't pay too much. Don't get too greedy. I know you want to do a lot of deals. I'm not about how many you do. I'm about how much you make. I'd rather do 1 deal and make $1 million than do 100 deals and try to make $1 million. I'm about work smart and use your time. Again, the most valuable asset is time. So yeah, when people are starting out, there's always going to be issues you're going to have to overcome. But if you focus on the 2 or 3 items and then, build a good network. And I tell people the way you network is not really social media. It's a good network. We're out there. We're all over social media. Steve, you're out there on it. We use it as one of the tools for marketing. Yep. But networking live, we did a mail out actually for Bill and Dwan because they were coming. We hadn't done a postcard mail out for the club in probably 6 or 7 years. And my marketing people said, hey, we need to make a statement on that card, a true fact statement. And I was sitting there going, okay, let me think of something. And I was coming up with all this stuff. They're like, no, those are questions. You're teasing the people with the answer. We want you to give the answer. So, and actually, let me grab one here real quick. Yeah. It's right here, one of the little cards we mailed out. And at the bottom, we wrote, live networking has made me more money than any other source in real estate. And people end up going, I don't want to network. I can do that on the computer. You put a face to somebody, you go down to the courthouse, you put a face to somebody, you go down to the probate courts and you put a face to somebody. One, you're already shocking the people down there because they don't get to see people very often. Everybody does everything these days online. But when you meet a person, you won't believe how that network can expand. I always talk about one of the guys that came to the club, never had seen him, showed up at the club, overheard me talking to somebody, came up afterwards, handed me a card, and I'm like, I get hundreds of these every week. But he said, if those guys don't buy it, I'm interested. I was like, okay, we'll see what happens. 2 days later, I called him. 6 days later, he bought it. And it was a huge profit. I mean, we assigned him the deal. I signed it for $35,000. He went on to make $30,000 himself in the retail part of it. So networking is huge. And I think that's how you build your business. Find out who the buyers are in your area. Go to the real estate club and find out what they're doing and supply those guys, the real investors, the ones that actually have the cash and can close. Because let me tell you, everybody has an ad that we buy houses. The reality is none of them have any money. Yeah. They have to use hard money, and I don't have a problem with that. But my guys that I use, if I call them, they'll close. They'll close in a couple of days. Now, if we're using IRAs, it takes longer. We're doing some of those right now. We did a couple of notes, and we just did this house that's floating in escrow. But IRAs take a little longer, but the cash is there. So I'm real big about networking and networking at your club with the real players, because I know there's a lot of free things out there, but if you're just going to free stuff because it's free, think about how many other people are doing that. So you're networking in a room full of broke people.
Yeah, so true, man. Yeah. And I could tell you, like, and you can attest to this too. I'm sure whenever I'm asked to speak at an event that people are paying to go to, and I'm there as one of the presenters and one of the speakers, and I talk to those people, like, I'm going to Seattle. I think I introduced you to Tarl and Grace up in Seattle. And they have 500 to 700 people that pay good money for this, and I'm one of the keynote speakers, I have more relationships formed after I'm off stage and you're hanging out with them and you're talking to them and you're mixing with them. I could never get that relationship online. You could never. I mean, I've got some guys in Hawaii now that I know that are doing, development stuff. And so I've learned very much, like you said, it's that in the face, palm against palm. I want to get to know you. I want to look you in the eye. I want to get to know this person. And I could tell you, I've had so many doors opened because of that very simple and free, basically. I mean, I wouldn't say free. You got to pay something to get there and do it. But essentially, your impact, I think, is much more larger than a Instagram video or the YouTube videos or any of those things. Without a doubt, I 100% agree with you. Without a doubt. Let me.
And we have hundreds of YouTube videos out there. Yeah. We've been making YouTube videos for 10 years, and people will then always contact you. So what's the next step? And it's like, well, we sell trainings. We're not teaching the entire class here for free. Yeah. I mean, you have to have some skin in the game. I'm sure, Steve, you paid for training years ago, just like I did. I paid in the 80s, and it costs more in the 80s to learn than it does now. Yep. I know there's the big gurus that charge these big packages. Yeah, you don't need those. You need to go to your local real estate club and work maybe with them or somebody that's not trying to sell you $50,000 in training. I remember when we were doing some stuff for Russ and them, they had a training package that was $100,000. And I was like, in Texas, you could have already bought a house easily in fact, you probably could have bought two for $100,000 back in, late 90s, early 2000s. So I tell people, you've got to network. You've got to network at the right place too. You've got to go to the places where there are seasoned investors that have established a longevity. Because in this business, you get a lot of fly-by-night guys. You got guys out there telling you how to become millionaires that have never made millions of dollars, and they've only sold 10 or 12 houses, but they're great at marketing. And I'm like, you'll know a seasoned investor because you don't just buy to buy. You buy smart. I'm still very old school in that when I buy, that's when I make my money is when I buy. If I can't make money going into the deal, I don't think it's a deal. If it's a rental, then even like the one we're doing, even right there at closing, we collected $1,600 from a tenant while we're closing on the property. Nice. We're already starting off with a positive cash flow because you should make money. If you're trying to squeeze or get so creative to make anything work, keep in mind, if it was that hard to make it work, it could be real easy that it goes bad. I'm always about having some equity, strong cash flow, good location, but somewhere I want to have a couple of exit strategies, not just one. If I only have one exit strategy and I can't make that work, there could be some issues.
Yeah. Now let me ask you this, Jimmy. To date, right? You've been doing this a long time. What do you think going forward, if you have any, what are your current fears on the economy, the industry? What do you kind of raises the hair on the back of your neck that goes, that could be a challenge in the future? What, at least in your area, what are you seeing?
I think the biggest deal is going to be the competition. There are so many people getting into this, and here's the phone calls I hear most often. Somebody's quick at marketing, they're quick at making calls, they're quick at doing a lot of things, but they don't have the experience to do the deal. The homeowner gets burned by 2 or 3 newbies, and now they won't even deal with the seasoned investor. I think the biggest issue we're going to have moving forward is inexperienced people trying to put deals together, and in the process, they're killing the deals for everybody else, because after you get a hold of 2 or 3 people that don't know what they're doing, the homeowner shuts down. The homeowner feels like every investor is just a liar, basically. I've had people tell me, I can't believe I dealt with these people or this happened. I can always survive in any market. I've been in 32 years, up, down, as long as you're set right. I mean, you may not always be able to retail, but if you buy it right and can rent it, you'll be okay. If you can buy it, sell it owner finance, create a note, you'll be okay. You can always sell the note. But the biggest issue is getting the deal. That, to me, they're getting harder and harder to find. And when you really focus, and I find people that are great deals, and then they're very reluctant to talk to me, it's because they've already talked to someone else who did not fulfill what they said they were going to do. And that's the issue. I think too many people are trying this. They're trying to learn it out there on the internet or from somebody, or they read a book, and then they give it a shot, not concerned with the person who's in a jam. It's different when you're dealing with investors. An investor, if I was a motivated seller and I'm an investor and a newbie calls me, I already know they're a newbie because I know by just what they're asking me, they don't know what they're doing. But if I'm a homeowner, I don't know that. And so the homeowner's trusting this person on the other end saying, I'm an investor, we can buy it cash. And the person's still trying to figure out, I don't even know what to do with it. I don't know what it's worth. I don't have the cash. I'm just going to try to tie it up and then throw it on social media and see if somebody buys it. And most of the time, I think this is the other problem we're going to have is we've got so many people out there teaching things that are wrong that we're going to have an issue. I mean, we already have legislation going a little crazy here in Texas. You know, you've got Eddie Speed and those guys working on the wraps and situations down in Austin. But what about what's going to happen with the way people are marketing? They're marketing things saying, I have a house for sale. When they don't have a house for sale, they have a contract for sale. Yeah. Those are the things, and the reason I say this is I'm sure you remember, Steve, but I know when I started out, contract for deeds were awesome. Yeah. Nobody's doing those anymore. No. You wouldn't want to do it. It was a great tool for investors, but I wouldn't use it. Then we had the lease option, the basic lease option. Now you have to get so creative to make that work, and that's what's happening. When you get a lot of unprofessional, inexperienced people in the business or trying to do the business, they actually start hurting the business all the way around, not just homeowners, but also with legislation and our Congress in Austin. The laws get changed because it only takes a few. I remember it was a few guys in Houston that did something wrong with some lease options. Then there were some guys up here in Fort Worth that did some owner finances and escrowed taxes and insurance and then didn't pay the people's insurance. I mean, this is why regulation gets so tight, because you have people that don't know what they're doing. And It's just because they're from a get-rich-quick mentality and they forget it is a business. So when moving forward, what do I see? I see that's the most dangerous thing. I can always make money up or down cycles. That doesn't bother me. I make more money in a down cycle than I do an up cycle. So that doesn't bother me about where the markets go. But are there things that could happen? Yeah. And it's all in a lot of it's in the political realm too. We don't know what happens, the next time. I remember 2008 because of such a crash, but we had a new president that came in, and markets didn't like what he was doing, and we had collapses, and we had not just in the U.S., all over the world. I'm still holding some things. Thank goodness they're coming back now in Costa Rica, but we had some stuff we should have had only 2-3 years. But when the markets are affected by people, it's like I said, people in real estate don't know what they're doing, and politicians who don't know what they're doing. Yeah, I'm always amazed at how people will get mad at a politician who actually knows what they're doing, somebody who is a business person and knows how to run it. This country is a business, and you need to run business, because without businesses, you don't have jobs. And if we're not doing good, Steve, we're not hiring vendors to do the work.
True.
So I'm always about there's a domino effect. And I think that's where I see the biggest concerns is too many unprofessional people with very little knowledge messing up what they have no clue what they're doing. And I see that as a big, and most investors out there, gurus out there will never bring that up. But I do. I always go back to knowing how I've succeeded 32 years. It's the markets, it's the people in power, it's the laws that allow us to do things, and then not the regulation that keeps us from doing what we should be able to do. You look at, Dodd-Frank, perfect example. It makes no sense where you and I, who know what we're doing, are limited to doing so many, but a homeowner can do it and it's okay. Yeah. And I'm like, but a homeowner doesn't know what they're doing. Where's the logic behind that? We're talking owner finance, of course, but it's again, regulations. And I think that's the biggest issue.
So let me ask you this, Jimmy, as we kind of round this up a little bit. Someone like you, I mean, you've been in this business for ages. You're so knowledgeable. You're so experienced. How does someone like you keep educated? Like what does someone like you do? Because you've read all the books, written books, you've done all the things. I mean, how do you stay up and stay on your toes? Because every day you got to get up out of bed and you got to figure it out, right? How do you do?
hey, I do what I've always done. I buy books. I go to trainings. I sit through Bill and Dwan's, and I've done it longer than Bill and Dwan. But if Bill gives me or Dwan gives me one little nugget that I never thought about, that's a new nugget to play around with.
Yeah.
I didn't get to sit in with you last time in Houston because we were both speaking at the exact same time. But I saw you speak a little bit when you were in Fort Worth. So you learn little nuggets. I say the way you keep up is you keep going to clubs. You keep networking with the real investors. Go find out if you want to rehab a house, that's great. It's work. But go hang out like at my club. If somebody's going, I really want to rehab, I say, well, go talk to Trace. Not only is he an appraiser, an FHA appraiser, he rehabs about 4 or 5 a month. He knows rehabbing.
He knows what he's doing.
I know rehabbing, but I don't like rehabbing. I try to do as little work as possible to make as much as possible.
Yep.
So I'm seeing notes as a very viable avenue because I actually have better equity in notes than I'm finding in houses. If I do find great houses, I tend to wholesale them. I don't want to do the work. If I find one that needs very little work, you're not going to hear about it because I'm probably going to keep it as a rental.
Right.
I would rather sell some things on refinance. So I'm always telling people, the more you know, the more you're worth. But the way you learn it, don't just get on the internet to learn. Yeah, some of that stuff's great. I mean, I'm sure you've got videos out there. I have over 100 and something on YouTube, but it doesn't teach you everything. It just gives you a concept, a basis to start with. And then go to a club. Start a club if you have to, but get real investors to show up and say, this is what I do. And then when somebody asks me, like Steve didn't ask me no foreclosure questions because I don't do foreclosures. I know guys that do foreclosure. And if they have a house that I really want, they go to the foreclosure, they do everything, and then turn around and sell it to me. I don't do foreclosures. I've been to a couple of them. I don't like doing short sales. It's not my thing. So find your niche. Find what you like to do, but understand all of it in the sense of, hey, this is a great deal. This is where wholesalers, beginners make their biggest mistake. I think it's a great deal. I found the ARV. I know a little bit about rehab. So I'm going to wholesale it to Steve. It's worth $100. I'm going to sell it to him for $95,000 and make me $30. I'm like, I'm all for you making 30, but Steve's not going to buy it if he's only got 10 right now to start with, because the 10's gone just in cost, closing cost and a realtor's fee that went out the door.
Yep.
So I tell him, you got to leave enough room for the real investor that's going to make you wealthy by buying your inventory if you're wholesaling to them. I had one guy that was from California back in the 80s. That guy would buy a house every month. I'd make $2,000-$3,000. Yeah, I knew he was going to make 10, 15 at the time, but he needed to. He was taking the risk. I was just putting it under contract, selling the contract. I didn't have to deal with the city, permitting, repairs, holding the inventory, raising the cash, taking it out. So keep in mind, I'm all for making wholesale deals. You know, we have a guy that's here in Fort Worth, comes to the club. One of the very first deals he wholesaled it for $300,000.
Whoa.
That's one of those I go, man, that pisses me off. I ain't ever wholesaled one for $300,000.
You can't come back.
But he found the right deal. Huh?
Either you come back and teach or you can't come back at all, one or the other.
Yeah. And the thing is, he's gone on our bus trips. We do our annual infield bus trip. He's been on it a couple of times. I'm doing a deal with him right now. He's learned and he's taken training. It wasn't technically the only training he took for me was our bus trip, but he's learned to do it. But yeah, he got very blessed on one of those very first ones. He wholesaled the thing for $300,000. Now, of course, it wasn't all cash up front. It was half up front, and I think the other half is split over 5 years. So I won't give all of it away because I don't even know if he wants me telling people. But I'm like, wow, my biggest profit is probably $250,000, and it wasn't no assignment. Wow. So think of assigning something for $300,000.
Yeah. Well, Jimmy, so speaking of, as we wrap up here, and I just want to thank you so much for your time, because I know your time is protected, and I know you got to these events. Tell everyone kind of about, you know, your club, maybe who you have coming up next, if they want to get a hold of you, how they do that, your website, kind of give them all the down and dirty. Okay. It's a valuable club, and I think people need to know about it.
Yeah, in fact, Steve's going to be speaking there. I forgot the day. Is it September?
I think it's September.
I don't even remember.
Yeah.
I think it's September. We have two websites I give out. One is the club, and it's onereclub.com. It's the number one, reclub.com. All the information's there with who our speaker is going to be this month. Then there's Jimmy Reed, JIMMYREED.net. That's my page. It also links over to the club. The club meets the second Thursday of each month at the Fort Worth Botanical Gardens. We're one of the few clubs that charges, and that's why we keep the wannabes out. I'm all for anybody being new, but if you're not willing to spend a little bit of money to get in and learn, it tells me you're not really committed to doing this business.
Absolutely, 100%.
My dad always said, you're going to spend money to make money.
Yep.
You just better get over that process now and accept it and do it. I've paid for all my trainings. They cost money, and if I see something valuable, I will pay more. I've had millionaires. In fact, I have only two investors, one on the East Coast, one on the West Coast. Constantly are learning, training, buying trainings, learning everything they can, and they're like billionaires, you know. But I had one of them take a training from me in '98, and I'm like, what are you doing training? You know more than anybody I've ever seen. He goes, same thing, and I kind of robbed it from him. You give me one nugget, it's worth the money.
Absolutely.
If I can make money out of it. Those guys fund all of our deals. But basically, I'm saying that because the other guy, for fun, he went to law school after he retired just to become an attorney, but not to be an attorney, just so he would be knowledgeable in all the contracts and stuff.
Sure.
He's not an attorney, doesn't have any desire to be, but that was training he got on top of all this real estate training. So we say come to a club, spend the money to come to a club. I'm always joking with people, you know, the cost of the club is you skipping Chick-fil-A twice in a month. You know, make a sandwich at home or
What's
something.
it worth? Yeah.
So come to the club, network at the club, and take business cards. Take, you know, there's a lot of ways to network, but put stuff out. I mean, our club has a deal table. We've had it since the beginning. You can put deals out there for sale. You can put your business. If you're a contractor, put what you do. You know, networking is the key. And so the club, we have it once a month. I've still got Eddie Speed coming up this year. Joe Boston from the Dallas Club is going to speak. Steve, you're speaking. I got Robert King. Man, if you can make a meeting, I think he's in May. He is out of Florida. He's coming up here. I saw him in Vegas, and he's got a great program. It's one house is all you need, and it's more on the elderly or the retirement type of assisted living stuff. But he's got a great program, and he makes a lot of money by you having just one house, but getting paid for every room and for every bed in the house. So he'll be here in May. And I'm trying to think who else we got. I'm sure we've got some others, but that's right off the top of my head. You know what's so
funny is, you know, when you and I met, which was, 6 months ago or so, we started talking about people that we knew, the Marshall Silvers, the John Burleys, the people in the industry, the Bill and Dwan. You know, it's interesting how, you know, if you're going to free events, you're not going to meet these kinds of people. I guarantee you. These are not people that hang around with people that want things for free. These are people that say, if you're serious, put your money up and let's go, and I'll teach you what I know, but you're going to be serious about this, and I want to see your commitment. And it, you know, like you said, you're talking 2 Chick-fil-A sandwiches. I mean, when you think of the knowledge you have, or, you know, even myself or other people, it really blows your mind that somebody would even think about whether they should or should not take that commitment.
Absolutely.
You and I have invested hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not more, in training and educating and mentoring. But it's interesting that we know the same people, you know, and it's interesting.
You know, I always say you're not going to get a Marshall Silver to come to your club if it's at the Golden Corral.
That's true. Very true. Very true.
And people wonder, well, why do you charge? The Botanic Gardens is not a free place. Hotels are not free. Yep. So I understand, but I'm telling you, wealthy people, you just look at what the wealthy do. They pay thousands of dollars in places just to go play golf, to network with the right people. Yeah. I have a buddy of mine that when he's in Hawaii, it's several $100 to go shoot around the golf, but he's shooting around the golf with people that can change their lives. They don't come to that stuff. They don't come to the freebie stuff because they already know it's a bunch of broke people typically. In fact, I'd love to have Marshall show up at our club. I just don't know if that would ever work for him. But he does a lot of stuff. But you talk about a guy that can put the brain in the right position to get you going.
Yeah.
The next time you tell Marshall, tell him Jimmy wants him to come to the club.
I'll tell him.
We'll set him up for next year.
I know he wants to do something. I just, as you know, I just had dinner with him the other night, and again, just having dinner with him, engaging, and you're thinking, wow, this guy is one of the top in the world in his game. And I'm thinking, I'm sitting there having conversations with him, and you're just thinking, wow, like the opportunities that surround people like him. And he's asking me to do things, and chat and this and that. And it's very interesting that when you commit to something, and like you said, when you financially put that, commitment to learning. I mean, I've known Marshall many, many years now, and it's because I did that commitment to him, and I follow through, and, other doors have opened because of that. And I just, it's one of those things. So Jimmy, again, thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate it. And again, if anybody wants to see him, you got to go to Fort Worth. You got to look him up online. He's got hundreds of YouTube videos. And again, I know you're busy, and I don't want to take up more of your time. So this guy is just, I can't even tell you how much knowledge this guy has in his head, not even counting the books behind him, but you really need to look him up and talk to him. And if you want to know more about us and our website, selfmanagemyproperty.com, tons of education. I've got iTunes shows. So this show's on iTunes. You can share it on iTunes. And again, you're going to see some big players that are on our show. I'm going to have John Burley on my show. I got other people that are going to be on. These are people that are influencers that are changing, but they've all had bad days. Just like he said, he's had bad days. He's had issues, challenges. And it just because you're experienced in doing this for 30, 40 years, doesn't mean you don't get hit in the face every now and then by a vendor, by a contractor. And that's what I hope everybody learned today, is that you do have those days and you have those challenges. But again, even someone like Jimmy, he's been around, he's got stuff in Costa Rica, he's got stuff everywhere. That's what you need to learn, is you need to learn to stay focused on what you're doing, say no more than you say yes, and reinvest your education. Those are the things that I got out of this. So Jimmy, again,
can I say one more thing? I forgot to talk about my book.
Oh man. Yeah, go for it.
It's on Amazon, No Fear Real Estate. I wrote it 10 years ago, and it just got re-released a few months ago, and I forgot all about it. It's sitting here, I'm like, yeah, I should tell them. For $10, I think that's what it. And in fact, I think it's even $5 if you get that ebook. I don't know all that stuff, but get No Fear Real Estate.
No Fear Real Estate. Is that on your website? Can they get that on your website?
It is on the website, but I got to be honest, it's better just to Google it on Amazon.
Yeah.
If you just say No Fear Real Estate, it'll pop up on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. They can sell it cheaper than I can. In fact, they sell that ebook version of it for like $5. But when you come up to town, I'll give you a copy of it.
I want it signed, man. I want a signed copy.
I'll sign it.
All right, Jimmy.
I'll make sure of it.
Well, everybody, thanks for watching today. I appreciate it. And again, this is on iTunes. You can share it. Please pass it on to other people, and go to our Facebook group, the Landlord Survival Group on Facebook. Join it. There's a lot of serious investors on there that will help and will give some free tips and tidbits. So again, until next time, thank you all. We'll see you then.
Thanks, Steve.
All right. And
This has been the Landlord Survival Show. Join us next time for more of what the gurus don't tell you about owning rentals. And for even more, find us on Facebook.
Brought to you by Empire Industries Property Management. Built for investors, by investors. For more information about this show, visit our website, selfmanagemyproperty.com, home of the ultimate landlord survival handbook.